I think here's my big question for Mike. Can you go into the start of the season with Tatis, Profar, or either Marcy or Merrill and feel okay?
Well, guess what, John? Padres might tell you or might show you, yeah, we're going to try.
Maybe. That's what I'm going to ask him. Like, does he think they're going to try that, or do they have something up their sleeve? Are they going to make a trade? Are they going to sign someone? Or are they actually going to do Profar, Marcy, Tatis, which is great, Tatis. But the other two, are they really going to try to get away with that to start the year? That feels like getting away with something.
Well, it depends on who steps up, who performs. And if you get big time performances from your star players to kind of carry the load here, then I think you could get away with it for some time. But at the same, you're looking at the experience level of Jackson Merrill and Jacob Marcy, and you have Jerkson Profar. You have a couple non-roster invite players that could, be fighting for potentially a roster spot. Let's be real here. It's not the best situation when it comes to the outfield with the Padres, other than Fernando Tatis Jr.
Yeah, the Tatis part is great.
It's awesome.
It's just like saying, the Machado part is great once you get him back in the field. And the Bogaerts part, hopefully he has a nice year. I'm not worried about Tatis, Machado, Bogaerts. We can have our conversations about what they're capable of doing, but I'm not worried there. Slightly worried about Machado coming off an injury, but you get my point. What I am worried about is like Profar and a rookie getting like 500 plate appearances.
Would you say that's one of the top story? What's like your top storyline of this spring training
for the Padres?
Yeah, no, the
Brewers,
North Carolina Tar Heels,
the Blue Jays.
I like that. I'll tell you in a minute. All right, Mike Ferrin, MLB Network Radio, kind enough to join us once again. Jon and Jim, San Diego Sports 760. Padres have reported they're like a month out. This Korea series is going to be March 20th against the Dodgers in Seoul, Korea. Mike, we appreciate you hopping on. I mean, let me ask it this way. Do you think that the Padres are going to, quote unquote, try to get away with an outfield to start the season of Tatis, which is great, Profar on this 1 year, $1 million deal coming off a down year, and maybe a rookie, some combination of Marcy or Merrill, or are there upgrades still in store in your opinion?
I mean, you're not counting on Jose Azocar or Oscar Mercado
no.
to take that last spot?
Fair point.
So I would love to make a solid, strong prediction, but based on the way this winter has been and how it has just been so weird, I don't know that I can guarantee that. But I certainly got the sense from listening to AJ Preller yesterday that they're still in the market to try and upgrade. I think it's interesting that Jackson Merrill is going to get a lot of run this spring. I think it's interesting that they talked about him potentially playing a bunch of different positions during the course of the season. I think he's probably got, you normally don't want to see a young player be on the bench too much, but he's got a pretty low maintenance swing. He can really hit. So I wouldn't be surprised if he ends up making the team as kind of a super utility man who can play the outfield and a couple of different infield positions. But they have to add at least one more outfielder. Now, the problem is, where's that going to be? They certainly would seem to have the most playing time to be able to offer somebody who is one of the free agents that's left, if they liked Adam Duvall or wanted to bring back Tommy Pham or even a Randall Grichuk, who's more like a below average regular. But I think that they certainly seem like they're looking at the trade market. And as much as I really liked Marcy watching him in the fall, I think he's got a chance to be a pretty solid role player in the big leagues. I'm not sure that they want to commit to him being their center fielder going into the year. So, if they're going to try and get a center fielder via trade, great. If they're trying to get somebody who, can help to, potentially move Tatis to center and give them some power on the corner, I think that works, but there's still two outfielders and a first base DH type short, and that doesn't even count pitching depth, which, I think they're in better shape than the general perception is, but it's still not where it was a year ago in terms of having certainty in those innings.
Mike, what is your general thought process about young prospects, top-ranked prospects, starting at the big league level in a completely different position that they played in the minor league level? I mean, I don't think it's happened a lot in baseball, but we could potentially be seeing that here with Jackson Merrill.
Yeah, it's not unprecedented, though. I mean, like, Manny Machado didn't play any third base in the minor leagues, and then came up and was stuck at third. Now, you're talking about, a guy who's going to be likely a top 3 ballot Hall of Famer.
Right.
So it's probably unfair to compare that to Jackson Merrill, but I don't think it's all that unusual. Merrill's played on the dirt enough, like playing short and in second. I don't think that would be a problem. If they're going to have him try and learn left field, I don't think that's that big a deal either. So, I think he's one of those. Cronenworth kind of did the same thing, right? He had a little more experience at second, but, and he played short in college a fair amount, but he kind of bounced around a little bit more, I think, there than he had in the minors, if I remember right. I don't have the numbers in front of me, but listen, I think it's ideally you'd love to be able to get him to settle into one position, but Merrill's a good enough athlete that I think if he can handle multiple positions and be a bat that plays most every day, there's a lot of value in that. I mean, it's everybody's always looking for, that Ben Zobrist type, right? That guy that can play every day, but can play a bunch of different positions well. And if you have to leave him in one spot, let's say Bogarts were to get hurt or something like that, and you didn't want to slide Kim over to short, but Merrill could go out there for 3 weeks and play shortstop, right? Like that's a really, really valuable player. I think because of his athleticism and his baseball acumen, I don't think it would be that big of a deal. But you're right; it's not something that happens all that often.
Mike Ferrin, MLB Network Radio, with us on Jon and Jim. You mentioned Tommy Pham. He's an intriguing name here because obviously he was with the Padres. He had a very nice year. What he did with Arizona was very impressive at the end of last year. Overall, his numbers were very good a year ago after some down years. What do you envision the price tag to be on Tommy Pham?
That's a really good question. I mean, I think some of it depends on whether or not he's looking for a multi-year agreement. I mean, I think if he is, you're probably in that, I would guess somewhere in that, $16 to $18 million total range. I think probably, like if we're going, maybe it's a little bit north of that even. I don't know. It's like maybe 1 plus a mutual option. I could see him somewhere in, like 8 to 11 million, somewhere around that for 1 year. And I realize that's a pretty wide swath, but I think some of it depends on how much playing time is going to be guaranteed. I mean, Pham was a little bit of a surprise just based on what he'd done the previous couple of seasons to be, a solid average regular last year. And I'm sure he wants to get paid like that, which would be, closer probably to 13 or $14 million a year. But I think some of it's going to depend on the plate appearances and whatnot with that. And at the same time, like, I think there's a lot of value that Pham brings. And I think, I don't know if it's fair criticism of the clubhouse, because the thing is that like everybody from the outside talked about how bad the Padres clubhouse was. And people that I trust who are around that team said, no, it wasn't really an issue. But Tommy Pham's not afraid to put a boot in anybody's backside. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like that's one of the beauties of Tommy Pham. I mean, he's as tenacious a competitor as exists. And so, if you wanted somebody to help bring that commitment to winning and that focus on what it takes to compete and win every night, I think Pham is that guy. So I think it's probably, my guess is it's probably 1 plus some kind of an option, and maybe it's like, $8 million this year with 10 for next, but it's a mutual option, and part of that's like a $3 million buyout. That would be about where I would figure he would be, kind of on the high end.
When do you expect the final wave of free agents to make their, I guess, jump to a team? Like when do you expect the Blake Snells, the Chapmans of the world, the Bellingers to get on a team here?
Sometime before August. I think.
Yeah. Good answer.
I really think that based on what we've seen because this is not unprecedented, right? In the last 6 or 7 years, I do think that layoff or signing late impacts pitchers more than it does hitters, just because they're not in that routine early enough. So I would think Montgomery goes and then Snell probably after that, and it might be a little bit longer wait on Bellinger and Chapman and even JD Martinez in that. I mean, just because like it takes 50 plate appearances for a position player to get ready tops. Most of them can be ready in 30. And with the way they play, backfield B games, I mean, you can do that quick. Now, if we're talking about some of those guys' possibilities for the Padres, obviously the season starting March 20th ramps up a little quickly, for that position player group. But I think it's probably more like, all things being equal, right? Like if everybody were starting on March 30th, I think you're probably saying by March 15th, you would start to see those position players be off the board. And I think a couple of them will sign well before that. Like Adam Duvall's a really good role player. I don't know how much you guys have watched him, but like you can focus on the warts, right? Like he's not going to have for a high average. He strikes out too much. He's not a crazy walk guy, but he's a really good defender in the corner outfield. And he does hit for power. Good teammate. He plays center in a pinch, although I think at his age, I don't necessarily want him to do that, but he did start in center field for the Braves when they won the World Series. So like, there are some of those guys that I think you'll start to see end up on rosters here. But the other thing to keep in mind, and this is something that AJ mentioned yesterday too, was that the trade market is kind of late developing. And, there was some buzz today that the Pirates and Marlins are in pretty serious talks. We've heard the Padres linked to Duran, the center fielder, Jaron Duran from the Red Sox. Like there's some trade stuff that I think could get sparked here in a little bit that might create some opportunities for some of those teams to sign. Like if the Red Sox were to trade an outfielder, backfilling with somebody like Grichuk or Duvall would certainly make sense.
Mike Ferrin, MLB Network Radio, with us right now on Jon and Jim. So similar to the outfield question, what about the rotation question for the Padres? Yes, they have frontline starters, some off injury in the Darvish-Musgrove conversation. Then they add Michael King, who had a really nice half of a year with the Yankees a year ago in their rotation. What about beyond that? Like, do you think Padres fans should be confident that there's enough depth to fill that fourth and fifth spot? Or do you think A.J. Preller needs to be aggressive either via free agency or trade to address one of those starting spots?
Yeah, I think they probably need external help, but I would say that they may need it at some point. One other thing that this, and you guys kind of lived this a couple of years ago as Padres fans, that the change in the playoff format has shifted things around a little bit, right? Mm-hmm. So that idea that you have to have everybody ready to go earlier in the season is probably less important when you're talking about 84 or 85 wins getting you into the postseason of the National League. And I would assume that number is right around there, again. So maybe it buys them a little more time to see what they have with a couple of those guys. I wouldn't be surprised if they're looking at players on minor league deals who have some big league starting experience or coming back from injury or something like that they can fill in. I don't have any specific names I can give you, but somebody like guys like that, or if they wanted to, if Zach Greinke wants to pitch, if he wanted a low enough value deal, I know the numbers were not good last year, but that kind of thing I could see them doing. And then if you're in the mix, you address it at the deadline, right? So I think that's a possibility more than anything, unless all of a sudden there's a controllable starting pitcher that they can shake free by using their prospect capital and what they've done in terms of building that farm system back up in about a 2-year time frame is pretty impressive. So, AJ certainly isn't afraid to deal prospects. And so you could see them maybe making a move like that. But I think at this point, I can't put a finger on who would be a name that would be a fit for them. Let's say wanted to go down like the Michael Lorenzen route or something like that, which, Jake Odorizzi, who we interviewed today, like those guys aren't necessarily the sexiest names, but they may help to bring a little more stability and come relatively inexpensively.
Yeah, I think it's a really interesting point. Mike, we really appreciate your time. We're looking forward to the start of spring training for the Padres next week against the Dodgers. This Soul Series coming up in less than 5 weeks. Appreciate you doing it, Mike, in San Diego. Thank you.
Thanks, Mike.
No problem, guys. Take care.